Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a sociological theory that doesn't just explain what happens in the classroom, it might just change how you see the world around you. So, let's start with a question that I'm pretty sure we can all relate to. Think back to your school days. We've all been there, right? We've all seen it. That one student who always got called on, who always got the benefit of the doubt. But what if that favoritism was about more than just, personality? Well, that's exactly what sociologist Howard Becker thought. He decided to zoom way in. He argued that if you really want to find the roots of educational inequality, you shouldn't be looking at big, sweeping government policies. No, the real secret, he said, is in the small, everyday moments between a teacher and a student. Okay, so let's get into this foundational concept that Becker uncovered. He called it the ideal pupil. He proposed that teachers, often without even realizing it, carry around a mental checklist of what makes a perfect student. But here's the catch. That checklist might not be as objective as we think. And look, this wasn't just some abstract theory. It was based on real-world research. For his 1971 study, he sat down with 60 high school teachers in Chicago, and he just asked them to describe their best students. And as he listened, a very clear pattern started to emerge. Now, what's really fascinating here is what's not explicitly on the list. You don't really see most intelligent. Instead, the traits that teachers valued most were often tied to a student's background. They subconsciously preferred students who were middle class, well-behaved, and spoke in a certain way. And this often meant that working-class students got labeled negatively by comparison, even if they were just as capable academically. So a teacher makes a snap judgment. What's the big deal? Well, as we're about to see, it isn't just a harmless opinion. That initial label can kickstart a powerful and sometimes a deeply damaging cycle. And this is the engine that drives the whole theory, the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's this incredible idea that a teacher's expectation isn't just a prediction about the future. It's an active ingredient in creating that future. The label doesn't just describe reality, it actually starts to shape it. And you can see how it works in this step-by-step process. First, the teacher forms a label, bright, or maybe troublemaker. Then, they start to treat that student differently, maybe giving more attention and praise to the bright one. Next, the student picks up on this. They start to believe it, to internalize it. And finally, the student's behavior actually starts to align with the label, which then confirms the teacher's original bias. It's a complete circle. And this is not just speculation. There was a famous, absolutely stunning experiment by Rosenthal and Jacobson that provided proof. They went into a primary school, picked a few students completely at random, and then told the teachers that these specific kids were late bloomers who were expected to have a huge academic growth spurt. And what happened? Well, those exact students, the ones chosen by pure chance, made significantly more progress than their peers. Why? Simply because their teachers believed they would. So here's where it gets even bigger. This isn't just about one teacher's feelings toward one student. These individual, informal labels have a way of hardening, of becoming part of the actual structure of the school system itself. And decades of research show this domino effect in action. A study from 1970 by a researcher named Rist found that teachers were physically separating kindergartners into different ability groups based on their social class within just a few days of them starting school. Then you fast forward to the year 2000, and you have Gilborn and Udo finding high school teachers doing what they called educational triage, using these labels to decide which students were worth investing time in, often pushing working class and Black pupils into lower sets. Okay, so this all sounds incredibly bleak, right? But is it inevitable? Are students just passive puppets, really destined to live out these prophecies that are written for them by their teachers? And that right there is the biggest challenge to Becker's theory. Critics say it can be too deterministic, which is just a fancy way of saying it implies that once a label is applied, the outcome is set in stone. But a view like that really risks ignoring the resilience, the defiance, and just the sheer agency of the students themselves. Because the reality is often way more complicated. Sure, some students do internalize negative labels, but many others fight back. You see this in studies by researchers like Mary Fuller, who looked at a group of Black girls in London. They were labeled as failures by the school, but they actively rejected it. They formed their own subculture focused on succeeding, basically using the system's low expectations as fuel to prove everyone wrong. So if students can resist these labels, does the theory still hold up? Even with all its limitations, what's the ultimate takeaway from this really powerful idea? It really is about balance. The theory's great strength is that it shines this incredibly bright light on the power of teacher expectations. It shows how inequality isn't just some top-down problem. It's something that gets reproduced in tiny interactions every single day. But on the flip side, it doesn't tell the whole story. It can overlook student resistance, it ignores bigger factors like school funding, and it doesn't really explain where those teacher stereotypes come from in the first place. Ultimately, what Becker's theory gives us is a new lens to look through. It teaches us to see the invisible labels that exist, not just in schools, but in our workplaces, in our friend groups, in our communities. It really challenges us to ask who has the power to apply a label and what kind of reality is being created as a result. And trust me, once you start seeing the labels, you can't unsee them.